Hey there, welcome to the Office Tuesday. It's Tuesday the 27th of March, year of our Lord, and we are concluding our series on books that have been spiritual nourishment for me as a person of faith and as a pastor. And I'm concluding this with children's books that have been important for me as I've continued to form my faith. So some of these are religious and some of these aren't, but I think they're all very important. So the first of these books is a book called The Three Questions, and it's based on a story by Leo Tolstoy. And so the point of this book is this child wants to know the answer to three questions and goes and asks this turtle and explores these three questions in depth. And I think these are questions that we all, if we're very serious about our faith, are asking. And that is, what is the best time to do things? Who is the most important one? And what is the right thing to do? And I think this is a really, really interesting, important book. It's not like a book that I'm going to be able to read to Robert, as 4 or 5 year old. It's a pretty complicated book, but I think it's a very important book. So if you have older children or even youth who are willing for you to sit down and them gather around a book like this, I think this is a very important book. The next book I have, I've probably done this book before in a Tour de Office Tuesday, but again, I think it's just really important. This is a religious book here. It's called In God's Name. This is an interfaith book, meaning that it's not just Christian. The writer of this book is a Jewish rabbi, and this book is used by lots of different faith traditions. And the crux of this book is that these different people in the book are arguing over what God's name is. And so these folks know God differently through their own experience. It says the tired soldier who fought too many wars calls God maker of peace. A farmer whose skin is dark like the rich brown earth from which all things grew called God source of life. And it kind of helps us to understand that our perspective and our views on life really do shape the way that we understand God, and through a recognition of that we can kind of understand and be neighborly towards people who may call God a different name or experience God in a different way than us. And I think this is a very important book. This book is new. This is a book that just came out about a week or so ago. You probably heard about this book in some way, but this book is called A Day in the Life of Marlon Bundo. And it's a book that was put out by Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. And the reason I think this book is important, this book definitely has like political satire undertones, but one of the really important things I think that this book does is it introduces a conversation where relationships don't always have to be heteronormative to children. And so if you're reading children's books often, if there's relationships present, if they're romantic in nature, it's always usually between a man and a woman. And I think it's important to introduce conversations like this, that these boy bunny and another boy bunny are in love, and as Presbyterians we're cool with that. And so we and I personally think that it's a good thing for children to have exposure to ideas like this, because if they are kind of processing through life and sexuality, they wouldn't necessarily see it as abnormal or different. I deal often with pastoral care conversations with folks who feel alone and feel very abnormal because of all these aspects of their own childhood where they felt like non-heteronormative relationships were sort of viewed as weird or bad or ugly. This book's funny, and I think it's an important conversation starter for issues of sexuality. I think it's just a really fun book. The last book is definitely not one necessarily I would read to Robert because it's so real, but I think it's a really interesting book, especially for folks living in Knoxville. It's called White Flower, and it's written by David Lamont, who is a Presbyterian peacemaking musician who it's kind of hard to describe what he does because he does so many different things. But this book accounts for a protest that happened here in Knoxville. You see this opening page of this book that says, "The day was bright and sunny as most days tend to be in the hills of Appalachia down in Knoxville, Tennessee. It looks beautiful, except for the KKK on the next page." And so this book deals with issues of racism and fighting hate with love, which I think is something that we as people of faith would try to do as we encounter hate in our world. This is a pretty heavy book, just with the subject matter that it covers, but it's an important one to read, I think, if you have older children. So again, these are all books that I think are important for different reasons. I think this is a really heavy but important book about how to encounter hate groups in our world, which I don't know if you've read the news. They're like, it's come back, you know. And we're not cool with that. But how do we encounter and add our own counter narrative to their narrative of hate? This book, I think, is always important to normalize the LGBT experience, because folks need to know that that people who love people are people too. So I don't know another way to put that. And this book is important, I think, as we experience God in different ways. As we recognize that others experience God in different ways, then we can be more neighborly with them. And finally, I think this is a book that deals with things that we all have, questions that we all have as we seek to be people developing in the world. So those are books that I think are interesting or important. What books do you think are important? I've appreciated this time to go through some of the books that have nourished me or have helped me along the way, and I hope that you find books that nourish you. So I will see you next week on Truth the Office Tuesday.